Hello everybody, my name is Jeremy Siskind. I'm the author of Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 2, as well as 1 and 3. I'm the author of Playing Solo Jazz Piano, and I'm the author of the Solo Standards for Piano series. Kind of excited about today's video. I'm going to try to... I just demonstrated, if you believe it, 4 different concepts, at least, from Baroque music that apply to jazz. And so I've got these 6 terms. Some are general, some are specific. They're all a little bit different from Baroque music that I think apply beautifully to jazz. So if you're really nerdy like me, this video is for you. So we're going to dive in. I guess before we dive in, I should just mention most of you probably know what Baroque music is, but Baroque is music from around 1700, and it's known, I think when we think about Baroque piano music, we think more than anything about Bach and counterpoint, which I'm about to talk about. But technically, Baroque, when you think about an art, refers to a highly ornamented style. 90% of what we talk about in piano music when we talk about Baroque is Bach. Bach almost is Baroque to most of us pianists who aren't specialists. So let's dive in. And I do want to start talking about this term counterpoint. And I've given several videos regarding counterpoint before. So counterpoint refers to a way of thinking about music that is based on linear melodies overlapping and coming together and interacting rather than set harmony. And this is really important and actually very in vogue in the jazz piano world. And probably the name more than any other that comes up when we think about this is Brad Mehldau, because he will improvise multiple melodies simultaneously. He'll form new chords out of kind of these interactions of the melodies. And this is the beautiful thing about counterpoint, is that we are able to invent really sounds that are new and unexpected even for us because we're not thinking in this top-down method. So for instance, if I'm improvising an arrangement of Autumn Leaves and I'm... So that's 2 voice counterpoint. I could, not well, but I could improvise. I could improvise 3 or 4 different voices. Each one becomes a little bit more static as we get to more voices. Now, counterpoint, like I said, when we improvise an arrangement like I just did where there's, multiple active melodies, the counterpoint becomes obvious. But counterpoint is always present, right? For instance, the interaction between the melody and the bass forms counterpoint. These are 2 melodies. So... if there's a walking bass line, it becomes more complex. Now, many great musicians in modern times and in history study counterpoint. It is one of those things that you can really formally study, and there are, a few important books. The main one that I learned from, I hesitate to pronounce the author's name because it's spelled F-U-X. I'm told it's something like Fuchs. But there's what's called species counterpoint, which is the formal study of counterpoint. And when you study species counterpoint, you study rules about consonants and dissonance, how many consonants are allowed, what are the different types of intervals, and then you study species. And the first species is 1 against 1, where the 2 melodies are moving at the same time. And then the second species is 1 against 2, how there's two right hand notes for every left hand note. And then you have 1 against 4. This is just improvised counterpoint. I think I would have failed my exam. And then there's other things like offset or suspensions would be probably the more formal way. So that gives you a slightly wide view of what counterpoint is. But I know great composers and improvisers who are taking counterpoint lessons religiously, because this is kind of a very core part of what music is, and how to write a good melody. Second big thing is ornaments, right? This is something that jazz and Baroque music have very much in common. We both love ornaments. I told you that Baroque style is, in many ways named for its highly ornamental style. And jazz, we love things like, grace notes, turns, double notes on the piano, scoops. And I think it's relevant, first of all, just to consider how important ornaments are. And they're important for different reasons in the two styles. In Baroque music, I'm not as much of an expert in Baroque music as I am in jazz, but in Baroque music, it is largely to make it this ornamental, lush is the wrong word, complex, intricate kind of decorated style. Whereas in jazz, it's actually about imitating the voice and being expressive, being able to play the same note in multiple ways. But one place where I think jazz musicians can take more inspiration from Baroque is just in the variety of ornaments. We encounter all kinds of mordents, double mordents. I can't even, I can't name them all because I'm not educated enough. But just to consider, all the different ways that we could approach a note, I think is really inspiring. And it could be a kind of a fun project to look up all the different Baroque ornaments and see if you can use them in a ballad solo, for instance. Third one is one I love talking about, compound melody. Okay, so compound melody means that within a single note melody that could be played by like a flute or a saxophone, we're implying multiple melodies. So, for instance, if I played you would probably hear Ode to Joy. And I might say, well, no, that's not the actual melody. The melody is ba bo ba bo ba bo ba. Right, it's not exactly Ode to Joy. But we hear Ode to Joy because our ear is trained to pick up on these different levels. Now, this happens all the time, especially in Bach's music. You think of things like the cello suites. What's happening is that this single note instrument is implying a whole chorale of different melodies. Now, Charlie Parker and the great bebop musicians do this all the time. A great example is Blues for Alice, which I'm going to notate for you here. Well, first I'll notate the compound melody. Simple scale down, but Charlie Parker adds ba bo be bo bo. Baby boo baby do 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 do. Right? So, it's not just, he's playing arpeggios, he's doing enclosures. His style is so much more complicated because, like Bach, he's taking this single note melody instrument and he's making it imply all these rich tapestries of melodies. Okay, a cadenza is an unmetered, virtuosic portion of a piece. Usually it's right before the ending. And this is pretty common in jazz ballads. That, we'll get to the end and then one musician, it might be a saxophonist, it might be a pianist, it might rarely be a bass player, will improvise something to kind of heighten the tension before the last note. And in fact, in the Baroque era, cadenzas were really often improvised. And so, if I'm playing Body and Soul, I'm in the last A section. I might come to a fermata, and then finally play the last phrase. Right. Another place that cadenzas happen could be in an introduction, before a song even starts. Or if you're playing a rubato ballad, you can think about playing a few phrases and then playing a cadenza. So if I want to start Body and Soul, like in a rubato style, I might play and then a cadenza. Not that long, but cadenza. Back into the melody. Cadenza. Right, another cadenza here. So cadenzas, often they are, I hate to use the word showy, but often they're times to be playful because you're getting out of the strict meter, and requirements of the music. So it's time to be a little bit playful with the elements, to test the limits of your instrument, to get away from the middle of the piano, to play fast scales, fast arpeggios, can be really nice in a cadenza. All right, the last two are much more specific and theoretical. Number 5 is voice exchange. And this is just kind of a simple principle in counterpoint that, if we have two voices separated by, most commonly, I guess this could apply to other things, but most common is if you have two notes separated by a third. Let's take out that middle note for now. When you exchange them, you still get a consonant harmony. So here's, if I can get it to the right. So I've got an E on top and a G on bottom in that first, and it changes to a G on top and an E on bottom. This would be lovely for a C7 or something like that. And so in this way, you always have a full chord, even while being able to provide some motion. Now this has a lot of implications for a jazz pianist because we love having full chords. We also might connect, right? These voices are only a third apart, so we can go. Or maybe, we could do a more chromatic connection since we're playing in a jazz style. You could imagine this also being useful. So I'm playing a C major 7. Maybe it's also useful in F. F chord or a G sus. Maybe not so much in that one. Or a E7 sharp 9. Or a B flat 7. Right? It's kind of an interesting way to keep the full chord, but then also have some motion. So if I'm going to use it, if I'm going to demonstrate, I'm stuck. So you could be really creative with that voice exchange idea. And then number 6 is cross relation. This is a really interesting idea. And basically what it means is that you, at different times, have different versions of the same pitch class. So maybe in the right hand you have a D natural, but in the left hand you have a D sharp. And good Baroque composers kind of liked putting in these cross relations to add color and interest and intrigue, rather than have everything kind of be from the same chord. So this is something that we can try in jazz piano too. Maybe maybe if you're playing something very diatonic like in C. I've got G's and A's in the right hand, but then I'm using the G sharp or A flat in the left hand. This isn't a useful view. So I would count that as a cross relation. And this is pretty normal in jazz, but I think it's interesting to use it intentionally. This is just a spontaneous thought, but let me show you a chart that an arrangement I'm working on writing that uses this principle of a cross relation. Let's see. So this is an arrangement I'm doing of a beautiful Tom Harrell tune called Snow. And let's go to the part where it's a little bit lower so we can read it. So notice all of the discrepancies in these first few bars between G sharp and G, right? We have got a G sharp there, then we got a G natural, then we got a G sharp, then we got a G natural. So in different octaves, in different parts, in different moments, we're getting all of these different versions of the same pitch, which keeps things really interesting. And then again, down here, we've got this G versus G sharp versus G, all happening in quick succession. So I think to the extent that this arrangement hopefully is like a little bit surprising and fresh without being totally like out and crazy, it's due to those cross relations, those different versions of the G and the G sharp. So let me get back to my original page, and I'll give my little concluding statement that these are 6 different terms from Baroque music that have implications in jazz. I'm sure that there's many, many more that I missed. So we've got counterpoint, ornaments, compound melody, cadenza, voice exchange, and cross relations. If you enjoy this kind of nerdery, you might enjoy the nerdery of playing solo jazz piano, which is just like a really deep study on everything related to how to arrange music on the piano. And there is a chapter about counterpoint in this book, so it might be worth checking out. Thank you so much for watching. Can you make a bad pun about Baroque or use Bach's name if you've watched this far? Something like Bach to the future, or if it ain't Baroque, don't fix it. Anything like that. The cheesier, the better. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.